My parents cut me out of their will, so I bought the house they left my brother. The words replayed in my head like a cruel joke as I sat in the dimly lit office of Jenkins and Cole attorneys. The air smelled faintly of old paper and lemon polish. Thick curtains blocked out most of the morning sun, casting the room in a somber glow that matched the occasion. I sat with my hands clasped tightly together, my knuckles white. Across from me, Josh leaned back in his chair, legs crossed, expensive watch catching the little light that managed to sneak through. He wore the grief well, or at least he performed it convincingly. A dark suit, just the right amount of stubble to look rugged, not unkempt. The golden boy, as always. Mr. Jenkins cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses as he shuffled the papers. Thank you for coming, gentlemen. Your parents' wishes were clear. I will now proceed with the reading of the will. I tried to steady my breathing, feeling a tightness in my chest I hadn't expected. Maybe deep down, I thought this would be the moment things were made right. That after all the years of being overlooked, of being the second son in every way that counted, I'd finally be seen. But the universe, or maybe just my parents, had other plans. Mr. Jenkins' voice droned on, but I caught every word as if they were etched into my skin. The house at 23 Willow Lane, all attached land, and contents thereof, are bequeathed to Joshua Michael Carter. The sum of $250,000 in savings and investments is bequeathed to Joshua Michael Carter. The collection of antique clocks and furniture is bequeathed to Joshua Michael Carter. On and on it went, each item a nail in a coffin I hadn't realized I was lying in. Finally, Jenkins paused, eyes flicking to me as if he dreaded this part. To Shane Robert Carter, we leave the family photograph in the silver frame, currently displayed in the living room. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Josh let out a low whistle, shifting forward. Wow, I mean that's unexpected. He glanced at me with what he probably thought was sympathy, but the smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth betrayed him. Hey bro, if you need anything, you know I've got you. We're family after all. Family. The word tasted bitter. I stared down at my hands, my mind a blur of memories. All the times I stayed late to help Dad with chores around the house. The weekends I spent keeping Mom company when Josh was off with friends or girls, or on some new adventure. The holidays when I was the one who remembered the little details that made things special. And yet, here I was, given a photo, a relic of a family I clearly hadn't been part of in their eyes. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins, I managed to say, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. I stood, smoothing down the front of my jacket. I appreciate your time. Josh stood too, clapping a hand on my shoulder. Really, Shane, we'll figure something out. You can always stay at the house if you need to. I'm sure there's a room that can be made up for you. I stepped back slightly, the gesture burning more than comforting. That won't be necessary. Outside, the sunlight hit me like a slap. I blinked against it, feeling the weight of everything I hadn't said pressing against my ribs. The photograph, a lifetime of being invisible, neatly summarized in a single silver frame. I walked away from that office determined, not angry, not yet, just resolute. They'd made their choice. Now, I'd make mine. 2 years can change everything. I hadn't seen much of Josh since the day we left the lawyer's office. Our lives drifted apart, or maybe I simply stopped trying to stay connected. But the town was small, and news traveled fast. Josh, it seemed, was making the most of his inheritance in all the wrong ways. I'd see flashes of him around town, behind the wheel of a gleaming sports car one month and something even flashier the next. I'd pass by the upscale steakhouse on Main and catch a glimpse of him through the window, surrounded by people I didn't recognize, laughing too loudly, ordering the most expensive bottles on the menu. It was as if he thought the money would never run out. And maybe, for a while, it didn't. But excess has a way of catching up with people like Josh. One night, late, I ducked into O'Reilly's, a local bar where I sometimes went to unwind after work. The place smelled of old beer and fried food, the lighting low enough to hide the cracks in the walls. That's when I saw him. Josh was at a corner table with 3 guys I didn't recognize, the kind of men who laugh a little too hard at bad jokes and glance at each other when the check comes, waiting for someone else to grab it. Josh was that someone. His eyes were glassy, his shirt untucked, hair messier than I'd ever seen it. He was holding court, telling some story I couldn't hear over the noise, waving his arms dramatically. The others leaned in, nodding, egging him on, their smiles wide and empty. I watched for a minute, unnoticed. It was like looking at a stranger, or maybe a man I'd always known was beneath the surface, now laid bare. I left without speaking to him. Weeks turned into months. The rumors grew louder. Josh's businesses, if you could call them that, failed one after another. A gourmet hot dog stand that nobody wanted. A clothing boutique that never opened. A cryptocurrency venture that collapsed before it even began. And the house, our parents' house, began to show the signs. I'd drive by sometimes, unable to help myself. The white paint on the front porch peeled in long strips. One shutter hung crookedly, banging against the siding in the wind. The grass, once neatly trimmed by Dad's careful hands, grew wild and patchy. It was heartbreaking. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I felt something else too. A sense of justice, satisfaction. I wasn't proud of it, but I couldn't deny it. He'd been handed everything, and now he was watching it slip through his fingers. Then came the day I stopped by the bank. I'd been meaning to check on my own mortgage, nothing to do with Josh, or so I told myself. But as I stood at the counter, a familiar face appeared. Mark, an old high school classmate who now worked in loans. "Hey Shane," he said, lowering his voice, glancing around. "Did you hear? Your folks' place. It's in foreclosure." I stared at him, trying to process the words. Josh defaulted on the loan he took out against it. Bank's putting it up for auction next month. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The house that had been the backdrop of my childhood, the Christmas mornings, the backyard barbecues, the nights I stared out my bedroom window at the stars, was being sold off like a piece of junk. I thanked Mark and left the bank, my mind spinning. As I stood on the sidewalk, watching the town I'd grown up in bustle around me, I realized something. This wasn't just about a house. This was about everything that had led to this moment. Josh had been given the world on a silver platter, and he'd managed to break it into pieces. And now, the house, my house in so many ways, was up for grabs. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to stand by and watch a stranger take it. The auction hall was smaller than I'd expected. A converted meeting room in the back of the bank, with beige walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and the faint smell of stale coffee and printer ink. The hum of the air conditioning was louder than the murmurs of the dozen or so people scattered throughout the room. A large screen on the far wall displayed the property listing, 23 Willow Lane. Single-family residence, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, attached garage. I sat near the back, my hands gripping the edge of my chair, debating whether I should even be here. What was I doing? Why did I care? It was just a house. Bricks and wood, and memories best left buried. But it wasn't just a house. It was our house. The place where I'd grown up, where I'd first learned to ride a bike, where Mom had taught me how to bake cookies in that too-small kitchen. And if it was going to belong to someone, a stranger who'd rip out the old rose bushes Dad planted, who wouldn't know why there was a notch carved into the banister at the top of the stairs, shouldn't it be me? The auctioneer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice too loud for the room, called everyone to attention. "Let's begin," he said, tapping on the microphone. Opening bid, 100,000. A bidder raised their card. Then another. I hesitated, heart pounding. "You don't have to do this," I told myself. "Let it go. Move on." But my hand lifted, almost of its own accord. 120, the auctioneer called out. The numbers climbed. 140, 160, 175. I wiped my palms on my jeans, aware of the slight tremor in my fingers. Every time I raised my hand, it felt heavier, as if the weight of every memory in that house was pressing down on me. 180, I said clearly when the auctioneer looked my way. It was between me and one other bidder now, a woman in a navy suit, expression unreadable, probably a flipper or investor. She glanced at her phone, then nodded at the auctioneer. 190, he announced. I hesitated. That was pushing my limit. I'd have to dip into savings I'd set aside for other things. But then I thought about that crooked shutter, the overgrown yard, about Josh, who'd let it all fall apart. 200, I said. My voice didn't shake this time. The woman hesitated, checked her phone again, shook her head. 200,000, going once, going twice. The pause felt eternal. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, The room blurred at the edges, relief and sadness mixing in a strange hollow cocktail. It was mine. The house was mine. But the past wasn't coming with it. I gathered my paperwork, trying to ignore the buzzing in my ears. As I stepped into the hall, I nearly collided with him. Josh. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his clothes rumpled, eyes bloodshot, face pale. He stared at me, then at the folder in my hands, and seemed to understand everything in an instant. "You bought it," he said, voice low. I nodded. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, maybe to protest, maybe to beg, but nothing came out. He just stood there, the weight of his failure finally settling on his shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small next to him. I stepped past him, out into the afternoon sun, the keys to my past and my future in my pocket. The house stood silent as I walked up the cracked front steps, keys jingling in my hand. The porch sagged slightly under my weight, and I noticed a patch of missing paint where Dad's rocking chair used to sit. I paused at the door, fingers resting on the lock for a long moment. The smell of damp wood and faded memories seemed to seep through the cracks. I took a deep breath and turned the key. The door creaked open. The air inside was cool, heavy with dust and the faint scent of mildew. Light filtered through curtains that hadn't been drawn back in who knows how long, casting long stripes across the worn carpet. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. The quiet was almost deafening. Everywhere I looked, the past clung to the walls. In the faded floral wallpaper, the scuffed floors, the dent in the baseboard where Josh and I had crashed into it during a game of indoor soccer. I wandered through the house, the sound of my footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust. In the hallway, my eyes landed on the doorframe that led to the kitchen. I ran my fingers over the faint pencil marks etched into the wood, each one labeled with a name and a date. Josh, age 6. Shane, age 4. Higher up, Josh, 10. Shane, 8. I remembered standing there, barefoot, trying to stretch taller, wanting to catch up to my big brother. In the dining room, the old table still sat where it always had, though one leg wobbled now. I traced a hand across its surface, feeling the grooves where forks and knives had scratched the wood during years of family dinners. I could almost hear the echo of Mom's laugh, Dad's steady voice telling one of his dry jokes. The living room was the hardest, the empty space where the Christmas tree always stood. The shelf where Mom's porcelain angel collection used to sit. Only one remained, chipped at the wing. A small jewelry box, hers, forgotten in the corner. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. And for a moment, I wasn't a grown man standing in an empty house. I was a boy again, waiting for Christmas morning, the smell of cinnamon rolls in the oven, the warmth of family that had felt so real back then. But those days were gone. I set the box down gently and walked to the window, looking out at the overgrown yard. Weeds choked the flower beds. The swing that Dad hung from the big oak tree tilted at an awkward angle, one rope frayed almost through. I stood there for a long time, letting it all wash over me. The good, the bad, the weight of what was lost and what little was left. And then I made up my mind. This house, my house now, wasn't going to stay trapped in the past. I wasn't fixing it for Josh. I wasn't fixing it for the ghosts of Mom and Dad. I was fixing it for me. The next morning, I changed the locks. Something about the click of the new deadbolt sliding into place felt final, like drawing a line between the old and the new. I called a landscaping company to clear out the yard, haul away the junk that had piled up, scheduled a contractor to look at the roof and the porch. I started making lists, what needed repairing, what could be salvaged, what I wanted to change. I opened the windows wide, letting fresh air chase out the stale sadness. And as I stood on the porch that evening, watching the last of the sun dip behind the trees, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. The evening was quiet, the kind of stillness that made you hear your own thoughts too clearly. I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching as the sky turned from gold to dusky blue. The fresh scent of cut grass still lingered after the landscapers had finished earlier that day. For the first time in years, the yard looked like someone cared. I took a slow sip, letting the warmth chase away the chill that came with nightfall. That's when I heard the sound of tires crunching up the driveway. At first, I thought maybe it was the contractor coming back to drop off papers, or maybe one of the neighbors stopping by to say hello, but as the old minivan came into view, my stomach twisted. Josh. The van rolled to a stop, and for a moment, no one moved inside. Then the door opened, and Josh stepped out. He looked like a man who'd been beaten by life, not in the bruises and cuts kind of way, but in the way his shoulders slumped, in the deep lines around his eyes, in the defeated way he stood there staring at me. His once sharp suit was replaced by a wrinkled shirt and jeans that had seen better days. From the other side of the van, his wife stepped out, pulling their 2 kids along. The little girl clutched a stuffed animal to her chest, her wide eyes darting between me and Josh. The boy, older by a few years, kept his gaze fixed on the ground. "Shane," Josh called, his voice rough, as if he hadn't spoken in hours. I didn't move from my chair. "Evening, Josh." He hesitated at the bottom of the steps, then took a breath and came up onto the porch. Closer now, I could see how pale he was, how his hands trembled slightly at his sides. We didn't know where else to go," he said. I glanced at his wife. She avoided my eyes, looking out at the yard instead. Josh cleared his throat. "I screwed up. I know I did. I lost everything, Shane. The house, the money, everything Mom and Dad left me. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was smart enough. But I wasn't. His voice cracked, and for a second, he looked like the big brother I remembered, the one who used to sneak me candy when Mom wasn't looking, who used to push me on the swing in the backyard. "We're out of options," he said. "The shelter's full, the car's breaking down, the kids, they're hungry. I'm begging, Shane. Can we stay here? Just for a little while, just until I can figure things out." The words hung in the air, heavy as the night itself. The kids shifted closer to their mother, as if trying to disappear. She kept her arm protectively around them, silent, waiting. I felt a rush of emotions I hadn't expected. Part of me wanted to say no, to remind him of the smirk on his face at the lawyer's office, of the years he lived high while I scraped by, of the house he let rot until it almost fell apart. But another part of me, the part that still remembered birthdays and holidays and afternoons spent building forts in this very yard, couldn't look at his kids and see them suffer for his mistakes. I stared down into my coffee, now gone cold. "Let me think about it," I said finally. Josh blinked, as if he hadn't expected that answer. "Thank you," he whispered. "Really? Thank you." I didn't respond. I just watched as he led his family back to the van to wait, and the porch light flickered above me, casting long shadows across the yard that used to be ours. The house was silent, except for the creaks and groans of old wood settling in the night. Moonlight streamed through the uncovered windows, casting pale patterns on the floor. I stood in the living room, the same room where our family had once gathered for holidays, for birthdays, for quiet Sunday afternoons. Now it felt like a hollow shell, filled only with memories and ghosts. I walked slowly through the house, my bare feet cool against the worn floorboards. Every step echoed louder than I expected, as if the house itself was waiting for my decision. Outside, the minivan sat in the driveway, its silhouette dark and still. I knew Josh and his family were out there, probably trying to sleep, probably hoping, praying that I'd come out and tell them it was okay. But inside me, the war raged. Part of me wanted to leave them out there all night. Part of me wanted to make Josh feel just a fraction of what I'd felt walking out of that lawyer's office with nothing but a photo. I pictured his smirk, the way he'd patted my shoulder like I was some stray dog he'd toss scraps to. I pictured Dad, the look of disappointment he never bothered to hide, the sharp words that always seemed to cut deeper than intended. "Josh is the responsible one, Shane. Why can't you be more like him?" I clenched my jaw, my hands fisting at my sides. But then the other part of me spoke up, the quieter voice, the one I didn't always listen to. What good would it do? What would I gain by turning them away? Would it fix the past? Would it heal those old wounds? I walked into the kitchen, ran my fingers along the countertop where Mom used to roll out pie crusts. The moonlight glinted off the faucet, off the metal hinges of the empty cabinets. This house, this place I'd fought to reclaim, wasn't just about bricks and wood. It was about who I wanted to be. I stared out the window, at the minivan parked beneath the oak tree, the same tree where Dad hung that old swing, where Josh had pushed me higher and higher until I swore I could touch the clouds. We weren't those boys anymore. We hadn't been for a long time. But maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to be the man who let bitterness decide for him. I took a deep breath, the kind that filled my lungs and made my chest ache. I wouldn't do what they had done to me. I wouldn't shut them out just because I could. I'd do what was right. Not for Josh, not for Dad. For me. Morning came softly, bringing with it the scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers. I stood on the porch, sipping coffee, watching the sun rise over the yard that was finally starting to look like home again. The garden beds had been cleared and replanted. Bright bursts of color dotted the landscape where weeds used to choke the soil. The porch rail was no longer cracked. The house, piece by piece, was becoming whole. And so was I. The minivan was gone. Josh had taken his family to stay at a motel on the edge of town for the night. I'd told him I needed time and he'd respected that, or maybe he'd had no choice. When he returned that morning, he stood at the edge of the porch, shoulders hunched, waiting for my verdict. His wife and kids stayed in the car. I set my mug down and walked down the steps, meeting him on the path where Dad's roses used to grow, and would again soon. "Josh," I began, my voice calm, steady. I'd rehearsed these words in my head all night. "I can't give you this house. This is my home now. I fought for it, I rebuilt it, and I decide what happens here." His face fell, and for a second, I saw the flash of pride of old Josh, ready to argue, but it faded just as quickly, leaving behind the man life had humbled. "But I can offer you something else," I continued. "There's still work that needs doing. The fence, the roof, the shed out back. If you want, I'll hire you. It won't be charity, it'll be a job, a chance to earn, to stand on your own feet again." Josh swallowed hard, eyes glistening in the morning light. "You'd do that? After everything?" I nodded. "Not for you, for me, because I need to do what's right, not what's easy." He was quiet for a long time, then held out his hand. I shook it, feeling the weight of years in that grip. And that was that. Over the next few weeks, Josh came by most mornings, tools in hand, ready to work. He didn't ask for favors. He didn't complain. He fixed what needed fixing and left at the end of the day. And I focused on making the house a place of warmth, of welcome. When the last coat of paint had dried, when the garden was in full bloom, I invited friends over for dinner. People who had stood by me through the hard times. Co-workers who'd become like siblings. Neighbors who'd checked in when they saw me working late into the night. We set a long table on the porch, strung up lights in the trees, and filled the evening with laughter and good food. The air was warm, the stars bright, and for the first time in years, the house felt alive. I glanced out at the yard, at the home I'd reclaimed not just from my brother, but from the weight of the past. And I realized something simple, something I should have known all along. Sometimes, family isn't the people who gave you life. It's the ones you choose to let into yours. And here in this house, I'd finally chosen right.